Hey everyone, and welcome to This Explainer. Today, we're diving into literally the ultimate historical thought experiment, the immortal empire. What if Rome just never fell? What if the Roman Empire managed to survive, adapt, and basically conquer its way right into the modern age? We're going to explore an alternate timeline that completely rewrites the entire human story. And honestly, it challenges pretty much everything we know about how civilization is actually supposed to develop. So picture this for a second. You wake up in a world where the Roman eagle never vanished from the western sky. And those famous Roman roads, they never cracked into silence. Just imagine a reality where the legions never disappeared into our history books, and the absolute greatest empire the ancient world ever saw just kept going, breathing, evolving, and ruling through the centuries, right up to the present day. What does that actually look like? Well, it means absolutely zero dark ages, no shattered, fragmented Europe. We're talking about one continuous civilization. We are completely erasing that whole collapse of imperial authority in the West. So those modern borders you know today, they simply don't exist. Instead of this long unraveling of power and economic stability, you have one massive, continuous structure that stops Europe from ever fracturing into those scattered kingdoms and local fiefdoms we're also familiar with from our own history.
All right, kicking things off with part one, the fall that wasn't, and how they prevent that massive power vacuum.
Look, without the Western collapse, the most crucial thing to understand is that there is simply no power vacuum for feudalism to fill. In our timeline, when things fell apart, local warlords kind of just swooped in, trade shrank, and independent kingdoms popped up everywhere. But in this alternate reality, that continuous imperial structure just stays intact. The provinces stay integrated, the centralized taxation keeps flowing. The whole idea of being Roman isn't some ancient relic. It stays the central unifying identity of the entire Western world.
Now, obviously, Rome wouldn't just magically survive by staying exactly the same, right? No way. They'd have to seriously adapt to handle all those immense internal and external pressures. They'd need strategic administrative reforms. They'd have to deploy much more flexible field armies to secure their frontiers. And honestly, most importantly, instead of being overwhelmed by Germanic peoples, a surviving Rome would have to lean into provincial empowerment. They'd choose to absorb them, turning Franks and Goths into citizens, soldiers, and elites, and continually expanding what it actually means to be a Roman.
And rippling outward from that survival, we enter part two, a world without kings, where politics and religion are totally united.
You know that classic medieval tug-of-war between popes and kings? Yeah, scratch that. Completely gone. Instead of that decentralized, aristocratic patchwork, the dynamic totally changes. We'd see incredibly strong urban centers where the church is deeply, directly embedded right into the imperial administration. The emperor would basically continue to shape the faith, creating this heavily unified religious order right under state authority. It becomes this massive ideological system tying territory, law, and religion together into one unbreakable unit. Way, way more centralized than feudal Europe ever was.
And because of that crazy, unbreakable unity, the Mediterranean remains exactly what they always called it, a totally secure Roman lake. It doesn't turn into this backdrop for societal decline or endless pirate raids. It's literally the engine room of continuity. Maritime commerce would remain incredibly strong under constant imperial protection. You'd have massive, totally unbothered shipments of grain, olive oil, and manufactured goods just flowing smoothly from North Africa straight to Italy, feeding millions under the watchful eye of one single civilization.
Which brings us to part three, unbroken chains of knowledge, or as I like to think of it, the Renaissance that just wasn't needed. Okay, history in this timeline flattens out in such a fascinating way. Think about our world. The 15th century Renaissance was a literal rebirth and rediscovery of classical learning after centuries of fragmentation, right? But here, classical learning never has to be rediscovered because you have continuous imperial state patrons protecting it from the 5th century onward. So instead of this sudden dramatic rebirth, you just get this super smooth, gradual intellectual evolution that leads straight into advanced modern infrastructure by the 20th century. It's like having this massive, stable patron for engineers, doctors, and philosophers. Just look at this breakdown. Instead of monks huddled in scattered monasteries trying to preserve whatever books they had left, you've got systematic, state-sponsored schools. Science wouldn't have this sharp contrast between ancient and modern. It would just be a continuous evolution of engineering. And instead of slowly, painstakingly rebuilding roads and cities over centuries, you get advanced urban planning way, way earlier, all because the Roman state can actually afford to protect and reproduce knowledge consistently.
But what happens when the super wealthy, unbroken civilization looks westward across the ocean? Welcome to Part 4, Exploring the New World with Roman Ships Across the Atlantic. All right, this is where the timeline gets completely wild. What does surviving Rome discover the Americas? I mean, if their navigation techniques just kept evolving smoothly alongside all their other continuous engineering, it is highly likely that a super powerful, wealthy Mediterranean empire would eventually get the curiosity and the economic drive to cross the Atlantic Ocean centuries earlier than in our timeline. Just imagine the sheer shock to the timeline. Instead of indigenous civilizations encountering this fragmented wave of Spanish, English, or French explorers, they face one singular, unified Roman imperial culture. Picture Roman forts, Roman law, and entirely new Roman provinces just popping up across the Atlantic. The SQR banner flying over the Caribbean, and the entire history of global colonization totally rewritten from scratch, with Latin as its absolute foundation. It's wild to think about.
All right, buckle up for Part 5, because this is probably the most mind-bending concept of this whole explainer. The modern imperial machine. Rome industrializes.
So here is where ancient institutional continuity meets raw modern technology. Imagine those famous ancient stone roads upgraded directly into transcontinental steel rail corridors. Picture massive Roman ports functioning as global shipping nodes, with electrical grids rolling out under strict unified imperial coordination. And my personal favorite visual, mechanized legions rolling out in standard-issue armor, fully equipped with rifles and artillery, all marching under that ancient eagle standard. It's this incredibly imposing, almost sci-fi blend of the ancient and the modern.
The sheer scale we are talking about here is just one continuous civilizational organism spanning millennia. You literally wouldn't view Rome as history. It would be a living, breathing reality all around you. You might commute to work on a highway maintained by a Roman public works corporation, fully participating in an economy managed by the single most durable, vast political structure in the history of humanity.
But hey, we do have to look at the shadow side of this timeline, right? Because a giant machine of stability, it's always going to prefer control over disruption. If an empire is this successful for this long, it might actively suppress local cultures, crush dissent, and intentionally delay any radical innovations that might threaten the status quo. The exact same mechanisms that kept it alive for centuries could easily turn it into this oppressive giant that tolerates absolutely zero opposition. And that right there is the core tension of this entire thought experiment. Yes, you absolutely get incredible stability. We're talking unprecedented peace, amazing continuous infrastructure, and high security. But the cost? Stagnation, a severe lack of independent invention, democratic evolution, and personal freedom. Humanity as a whole might be vastly more connected and secure, but at the heavy, heavy cost of living under an unbroken, hierarchical giant, where you are very comfortable, but maybe not truly free.
And yet, the dream of just one law, one road network, and one massive civic identity, it's deeply seductive, isn't it? As the quote here says, humans like continuity because it makes the world feel knowable. That psychological comfort, the promise of an unbreaking, predictable world, is exactly why this alternate history is so undeniably compelling to explore. Deep down, we kind of crave the order that a lasting Rome represents. So I'm going to leave you with this one final, pretty provocative thought. Is civilization actually stronger when it breaks and renews itself, or when it survives without interruption? Would a never-fallen Rome have made humanity safer, richer, and more advanced? Or would it just have made us more obedient to one long, unbroken imperial order? Take a second to really think about what our world today would look like if the empire had never fallen.